may not feel the ways that you think does the reopening. And today's show is a little bit different in the sense that
on looking at
obviously
how
we want to
kids have
talk
different
about
schools.
And welcome to Friday, and welcome to the debut edition of Ocean Freight TV. I am your host, Steve Herrera, CEO of Ocean Audit and also chairman of Ocean Freight TV. You know, I cannot think of a better way to start Friday than to bring you a little bit of my new hit single, Ocean Rap Pour. So let's hit it. Shipping costs are off the beams, but I ain't gonna let it get me down. I'm gonna find a way, guys, to turn this round. Yeah. The ocean freight refund machine, gonna turn my luck to serene. Got the cash back in my pocket. My cargo is going for a profit. Yeah, I found a tool that will do the trick. Ain't no need to throw a fit. Just enter my details and sit back and watch my refund stack. Yeah. Oh, the ocean freight refund machine. Gonna turn my luck to serene. Get the cash back in my pocket. My cargo's going for a profit. Oh, yeah. Now I ain't gonna stress no more. My business is gonna soar. My shipping fees ain't gonna weigh me down. I'm the king of this cargo town. Oh yeah. The ocean freight refund machine. Gonna turn my luck into serene. Get the cash back in my pocket. My cargo's going for a profit. Oh yeah. I'm out. Don't know who that guy was, but I guess they're doing wonderful things with Chat GPT. So now back, ladies and gentlemen, back to the regular programming hours of Ocean Freight TV. I'm your host, Steve Ferreira, CEO of Ocean. We covered that. Listen, I want to talk to you guys about something really, really interesting that I found in the market, and it has to do with just the incredible movements that we've seen in what I call the do not ship list. I think that there is a new movement ahead here. I'm getting calls. How many of you guys and gals are getting calls from auto warranty and scams, and you're on the FTC's, Federal Trade Commission's do not call list? I totally get it. I feel your pain. There's a whole new subculture out there that you guys need to be aware of, and it all has to do with e-commerce and with our good friends from China. We've seen a lot of even ads during the big game. That's typically the end of the NFL season. I won't say what it's called, but you guys all know what I'm talking about. E-commerce providers from China that we've never heard of, placing big bets and big ads in American TV. So with that said, I'm talking, of course, about e-commerce shipments where they're using ocean containers for the head haul leg from China to the U.S. and then distributing domestic parcels from U.S. Landed ports like L.A., Long Beach, to the American public. So in a single container, you could have 8,000, 9,000 shipments, and they're all part of what we call de minimis. And de minimis is basically, I know Pete Mento's out there watching. He's the scholar on that, as well as Dan Gardner. But it's shipments that have a value below $800, and they can pass through unencumbered with no duty and no customs taxes or fees associated with them. So here's the thing about it, and this is a groundbreaking story only here on Ocean Freight TV, only for myself, that I'm bringing this story to you. there is a subculture, within this particular de minimis where the American public is having their data revealed to scammers, to phishing procedures, on the internet. And it's really a danger because these de minimis shipments are declaring, Jamie Smith, 1 Main Street, Boston, Massachusetts, 02102, phone number, full details. And they're all in the public manifest. And I believe that should be a movement. And I'd like to be one of the champions of this to help the public understand the growing danger of buying e-commerce shipments from China in kind of this de minimis type methodology. Now, I'm not going to disclose names and addresses, but just to give you an example, the next slide I prepared shows you a little bit of what the nomenclature looks like. There's a consignee field. This is a manifest from a de minimis shipment last week. And if I clicked more deeply into the manifest, I could extract the names and informations of every single American buyer, tens of thousands of them. So it's another really Wild West that no one's ever talked about, but dearly and deeply needs to be regulated as we explore. Now, people have talked about de minimis for years, trying to stem the loopholes, and it looks like it's here to stay. Ladies and gentlemen, this is big time business, right? These de minimis shipments, but we're not protected as the American public. Our names are out in the open, and we need to do something about it. Now, let's talk about post-TPM. Post-TPM was amazing, and shout out to all my friends at S&P Global Market Intelligence at the JOC for putting on an incredible show. I look back at the time there, and it did take me, quite a bit of time to get back to normal. I almost felt like a little bit of Groundhog Day effect, coming back off the plane and just thinking about how, quote unquote, on, everyone had to be in terms of being able to observe and, most importantly, listen and share and contribute. So first couple hours are a lot of fun. And then as you start to get to day 2 and day 3, you've got to be a real veteran of and have the tenacity to get through that. But I think that the special delivery that we've seen come through in my post-TPM thoughts are really, have we moved to have we vacillated between kind of a cost-centric model and a value-centric model going forward on ocean freight? I think it's a very challenging time. We're kind of in still this landing, zone phase or landing strip phase in terms of where contracts will be proliferating, as we start to head more into the contract signing season. But it seems like right now, the status quo is that it's a cost-centric. We've kind of moved back to a look at costs as opposed to trying to achieve value, which I think is somewhat interesting, both from this perspective that I'll get into later in the show on what beneficial cargo owners are doing to recover from the deadly sins of Containergeddon. But at the same time, I think, beneficial cargo owners have very long memories in terms of the cost structures that have occurred in the past, as well as trying to surf the wave is a good analogy right now. And I think that if you look at value, what is value, right? I think value is, for example, saying to a beneficial cargo owner, hey, you better look at, instead of annual contracts, maybe just do 4 quarterly contracts. Think outside the box, and I think TPM was a great way to, take some of these mechanics that we all learned about at TPM. For example, the TPM Learning Academy concept was brilliant, and I just think that the educational component of TPM was by far and away, one of the biggest takeaways I think that BCOs will ramp up at and use year round, and not only year round, but at future TPMs. But in order to have that educational capacity work, right, we have to be in the structure where we're going to shed the old ways and move on to the new ways. In some ways, the ocean freight industry is still stuck in the 80s, in the 60s, maybe like me. And I think that we have to look at, breaking out of that box, breaking out of that mold, because we always keep going back to the cost matrix. And the cost matrix, the cost value structure, cost-centric structure was always very low, right? It's always very, you look at 2019, The average ocean freight refund was $200. You look at 2021, the average ocean freight refund recovery in my shop was $2,000. So, cost jumped, but also the recovery jumped alongside that. I think that if we look at the TPM, the one big takeaway, and I had a great talk with Lars Jensen, and I look at things that Lars has written since TPM, and we talk about kind of a Q3 strategy, or what does a Q3 landing look like. I think if you don't have a good Q3 strategy in place, then you might be a little bit too late, because all heck could break loose, and we could theoretically be looking at 2 to 3 times the ocean rates. Spot rates could really jump dramatically, and we'll get into that a little bit later in the show. But these are some of the important takeaways that I've thought about. And I think that when you think about the genre of TPM, I think there's been operational issues already put in play, right, that you might not know about, but they're ready to cause max pain. And we'll talk a little bit about that with some of the themes. But one of the themes of operational issues that the ocean vendors might be potentially, and again, these are all my personal and private thoughts that I'm sharing with my audience, but we may be being set up for a potential, resurgence of spot rates increases and ocean rate increases because of some of the operational things that are going on in the background. And some of the shocking numbers that I'll talk about a little bit later in the show as we expand. But TPM was a smashing success. And I want to thank again the whole TPM staff, JOC, SP, Global Market Intelligence team for hosting me as one of the credentialed journalists, which was really a first. I'm in such a privileged hybrid role as running Ocean Audit and also having the function of Ocean Freight TV, trying to bring you the latest and greatest news and information in show business, in the show business side of Ocean Freight, that news you can use. So let me give you my hot takes in terms of where we go from here in terms of a post TPM. And I think that some of the things that obviously would mandate that we'd be looking at some strong rates coming up is obviously we're in a position now, we've got the Fed, we've got banks, we've got inventory situations that are somewhat normalizing. Of course, we've got Ukraine, Russia. And Ukraine, Russia is really interesting because there's been some fine articles written over the last 2 or 3 weeks on, for example, the tanker industry, another side of ocean freight, or ocean transportation, but product and petroleum tankers. The daily rates to use these kind of ships have soared, right? Because avoiding war zones and longer haulage of products or bans on Russia, it just depends, right? Geopolitical, these are issues that could blow us out of the water in terms of sharp pivots in the ocean rate, God forbid, a Taiwan, China, geopolitical situation, which, obviously at TPM, General David Petraeus in his keynote didn't feel that was on the cards. But we have to prepare for everything. And that's why I mentioned that if you don't have a Q3 strategy, I think you're a little too late. I think that the setup right now really for consumers and carrier behavior and geopolitical, if you look at, for example, I know of a few people that we're in the market for housing right now, and it's challenging with mortgage rates being what they are. So more American folks, right, want to keep their 3.5% mortgages, and so you start to think, okay, I'm settling into pivoting into a summertime. Maybe the bank crisis passes us by, and we've got a little bit of potential stability. Does consumer behavior change? Does the carrier behavior change with blank sailings? Does it pivot in terms of how, the big initial contracts are looking, for the Walmarts, the Targets, the Lowe's, the Home Depots? How does that all shape and how does it all pivot? And I think you dashed it all in with a little bit of salt and pepper. And then you have to look at, one of the things that impressed the hell out of me, at TPM was the youth factor, the youth movement, and the logistics and supply chain leaders that I see up and coming that, are 20-something and 30-something. So some tremendous talent that's still, in some ways learning their way around the industry and, haven't seen necessarily, the same pitfalls that say, let's say, if you take a Warren Buffett, right? You see, well, Warren Buffett's been around for, 7 decades in the financial services. So he's seen the trends, right? It's the same thing with seeing the trends in ocean freight, shipping, and transportation. And I think that one of the big takeaways here is that, TPM is a fascinating mixture of vendors and beneficial cargo owners. And I think all too often, my hot take on, some of the pitfalls that you have to be careful of is getting the information, getting too much of your information, from the ocean vendor themselves, which is really kind of the Fox henhouse type effect. So I think that, if you don't have a Q3 strategy, yeah, okay, maybe it's not too late, but you really should be thinking about how am I going to pivot to that, because I'm not going to be able to rely only on low spot rates because of some of these factors that, for example, Steve mentioned in his Ocean Freight TV show. I think that one of the pivotal moments is this whole carrier Jenga type thing, and I'm fascinated with Jenga. It just seems like, to me, there's a Jenga building, and I love the fact that you can shape and pivot things here. And I think that, I have a really close friend. I hope he's watching, John Monroe. And John, I hope you're doing well in China. And, John really had, John's like me, a 40-year plus veteran of the ocean trade. And, John's feeling was that it wasn't COVID that necessarily killed port productivity. It was the fact that the ocean vendors saw a way to saw a demand and put in extra vessel loaders. We call them, loaders or, extra vessel capacity. And I think we had, over 100,000 extra FEUs, 40-foot equivalent containers come into ports that, created large demands for chassis and space, and certainly COVID, I think COVID is a very interesting excuse for why the supply chain problems happened. But keep in mind that, we have actors, and when I say actors, I mean the ocean freight vendors that also participate, and they're smart, effective businessmen and businesswomen that have seen the same kind of Warren Buffett trends over the years and understand, just what it takes to, build a business. And they get smarter, and, they sometimes get a little too maybe, profit savvy, right? What they went through in 21 and 22. And now we're in the situation now where we pivoted back to some extraordinarily low rates in the $1,000 range, where we're thinking maybe 1,500, 1,400 might be where, initial contracts end up. But that's not really the point. I think that this could be potentially a setup where we're starting to see a massive amount of empty containers. This year alone, far more empty containers from January to March of 2023 than we did see, of course, in 2022, which, is reasonable. But at the same time, the reason why this is a very, very, very important point for discussion is what happens when empty containers come into a port. They obviously compound and confuse and disorient port operations for not only storage, but also chassis and other port grounding and yard operational issues that, combined with a uptick in volumes, are definitely one of the deadly sins of container getting type style. So I think that you really have to focus on the fact that it wasn't COVID that necessarily got us to where we are. Yes, there were some symptoms of COVID and how COVID contributed, but you have to remember how the initial problem started. And it's almost like you look at how World War I started, with the assassination of that prince or king. My history is not too good right now, but sometimes these events start with very small moves and subtle moves that are already in motion that we really can't take back. And so I think with that said, what is the focus on the BCO? Well, the theme today is obviously what also happened not only at TPM, but really what's happening in recovery. And I think when you look at what's happening in recovery, it's amazing. I thought it was amazing at TPM that the topics on recovery was so prolific this year. And unfortunately, one of the big topics was, and the media had this all wrong, and I can go in for a million reasons why, but we only have another 10 minutes in our show. But the Federal Maritime Commission being the so-called savior, right, of beneficial cargo owners. The media has all wrong in terms of what the FMC's role is on, say, detention and demurrage. I saw a headline the other day, FMC new rules promote detention refunds or something like that. First off, the FMC looks as was a law broken. The media that's sending the American public and beneficial cargo owners and importers and exporters to the FMC, they are barking up the wrong tree. That is really the wrong approach that you don't want to be boxed into. And to prove my point, less than 25, 30 cases have reached the FMC level since the summer of 2022. It's much ado about nothing. A lot of that, unfortunately, got started by the Biden administration, touting the FMC is getting tougher on ocean freight shipping. And of course, the president had read that into his State of the Union speech. But TPM changed everything because I found in going around the show, I think there were 650 beneficial cargo owners there. I probably met half of them, and they're all hungry and gracious or grateful, right, in terms of anything that can be done to repatriate lost money to them. And I'll tell you why. It's because these men and women who are sitting on the front lines getting beat up, day to day by their CFOs and controllers. Why is the spend 25,000? It's a hard road to hoe in terms of the educational capacity or quantity to take that from a newly minted logistics director and bring that to the CFO. Very hard to translate on the uptick why these things are happening. So now that there's the ability to kind of follow the money, I think the fact is that the carriers love the media's distraction with the FMC because they realize that some of these FMC cases for detention or demurrage, $200,000 or $100,000 or $20,000. And I'm exaggerating a little bit. I mean, I'm over exaggerating because I think that the total sum that BCOs have won, if that's the right word, is less than $1 million, right? And for example, 3 weeks before TPM, I recovered over 10 million for 3 BCOs, and so everyone's really missing the mark on the whole issue of the FMC being the panacea for recovery. I think the FMC has some wonderful people. I've worked with a number of them over the years. I've been an expert witness there at the FMC. But this is the biggest misstory and misinformation, misdirected story, perhaps, coming out of TPM. Now, I found the secret. I found the secret on the advent of recovery. And I'm not so sure I like my artificial intelligence generated photo, especially with my Peloton diet here. And this picture is not doing me any service at all. But I found the secret to detention recovery. And best of all, it's FMC-less, meaning that you could ignore the FMC noise, that the FMC will settle all detention issues. Again, what a bunch of malarkey. The FMC will never get you a refund, right? The FMC is a law enforcement body first. And the language coming out of the FMC and FMC proposed rules, they just don't know which way to turn. But I did find the secret. No one really knows how to bill or count detention or demurrage days. I have found that, of course, I need auto-tune for my rap song, which I apologize, post-song for not having the auto-tune on today. But I think you like the natural lilt of my voice. But there's an auto-rate death sentence for your spend. And that was all the detention and demurrage invoices that took place from 2021 to present. They were just filled with abominable errors. And, it's just a sin, one of the deadly sins of Containergeddon. Now, there was 1 or 2 small turns of the dial that I picked up on in the last 3 years. One of them was the penultimate secret to advancing detention and demurrage recoveries for beneficial cargo owners. So obviously, I'm not going to tell you, the secret, because I don't want some generic freight auditor to get into the ocean freight recovery business, which is the space that I own with 20 of the Fortune 100. But I do want my audience to know, if you want those detention and demurrage recoveries, I can identify them in probably 5 days or less, and then you will have part of the secret. So I think that the other thing to talk about too, with regards to that, is that, all too often this is known as a transparent or a pass-through charge, and I think NVOs need to kind of get off the snide here and kind of fess up that it's not really a pass-through charge. NVOs are making money on detention and demurrage because they have special rates in their master contract with the vendors that will defer the full quantum of the demurrage detention to the NVO, and they may tell you they're passing on, costs, but really, that's a whole separate show. But let's talk about ocean freight forensics. We have a few minutes left, and I wanted to cover the very curious case of the 2019 DOJ investigation on a vessel that came into Philadelphia. Now, ocean freight searching on the manifest has an indelible mark, maybe even more so than somebody that would be searching on Google. And I think that if we stay on this slide, we talk about how the fact that there are some incredible juicy details in ocean freight forensics that can help not only law enforcement, but just the public know in general what's happening with cases. And every day, BCO shed 100% of their data to competitors and malicious actors that take the data and are able to use it for their own purposes. Now, one thing about this particular drug case, if I show the next slide, is this was a case in Philadelphia, June 17th, where the intervention took place on a particular vessel. And if I look at the next slide, you'll see that this is a official photo of the DOJ, from the DOJ, Department of Justice, showing their haul. But the one thing about this photo is that there's an identifying mark in the photo that tells me the container number. Now, I won't spend time on it, but trust me, it's there. So I can take that container number. And so they came in, they took the drugs out on June 17th. And if I show the next slide, it's important to note that, this is tracking for that particular container. But after the drugs were taken out, the container was put back on the ship, sent to Europe, and then to its final destination in Africa, perhaps. And again, I don't know the details of the case to find more about, who might be on the receiving end of it. So I think that when you look at the next slide, real quick, I have a real quick little ditty on the incredible amount of COVID test kits that are coming through. We've seen incredible amounts of COVID test kits coming in the last couple of weeks. I don't know why, how. And I say Osang, can you see? Osang is a manufacturer in Korea that has a Health and Human Services contract with the American government, $237 million commitment, only $32 million spent. Now, these COVID test kits have turned into the top 50 volume on my hit list. And if I show you the next slide, it'll give you a good feel for there's a slide that I missed out on that shows you the amount of the spend. But I've summarized it here. And this spend is incredible. Who even tests for COVID anymore? These containers are coming in. I've never seen so many containers in my life of COVID test kits. They just blew me away when I went into my manifest studies and I looked at everything coming in. This Osang company, and again, maybe a perfect reason why the American government, this contract was just signed in December of 2022. So why do we need so many test kits? Is it the Fauci ouchie all over again? Or is it something that we don't know about? Inquiring minds want to know. Well, I hope I've taken you through a great show today. I'm Steve Ferreira, CEO of Ocean Audit and Ocean Freight TV. And it's just been an honor to be back on the airways with you and present to you some of the eclectic and dynamic functional areas of ocean freight and the global supply chain that will enhance your supply chain and your interdepartmental growth. And most of all, the relationships between yourselves internally at each of your relative companies, between your CFO, procurement, ocean and payables folks. And certainly the one thing I found is that out of the 600 or so beneficial cargo owners, there was a collective 500 million or so in ocean freight refunds just sitting on the table waiting for those BCOs. And there's $5 billion in ocean freight overcharges and detention demurrage overcharges that are waiting for the rest of you. So remember, there is the book, there is the movie, The Secret. My secret is a little different. My secret is the sum total of 40,000 outlier hours to get you back 6- and 7-figure ocean freight refunds. And until we meet again, I'm Steve Ferreira. I want to wish you all a great weekend. Thanks for watching the debut issue of Ocean Freight TV. We'll catch you next week.